Kindergarten Wars takes place in a world where child assassinations are a common occurrence. To be more specific, small armies of hitmen are always targeting the kids of the rich and powerful. So naturally, the kids go to the world's safest kindergarten, where all the teachers are famous assassins who work there in a knockoff Suicide Squad type of arrangement, in which if they protect the kids, don't go against the rules and survive for a year, they're released from prison. Right off the bat, the goofy structure is very noticeable. That's because at its core, the manga is about romance and comedy. So even though there's constant violence, the vibes are very lighthearted until they're not. Sometimes, out of nowhere, the manga snaps and pulls out some incredibly creative plot beats and visuals, and then it's back to joshing around with a quirky cast. Reading this title feels like having a bipolar episode. There's mass slaughter, then pure-hearted romance. There's the worst suffering a human can endure, and then a joke about watching movies at 2x speed. It's just... the manga is such a weird, unique experience. The title has a lot of good things going for it and a lot of bad things dragging it down. And while I'm going over that, I need you to always have in mind that this manga has soul. No matter how wonky the art can look, no matter how many obvious plot holes there are, the author and the people who worked on the Kindergarten Wars clearly cared about it. The most obvious way to see that is to look at the art. At the start, the manga was self-published on the Shonen Jump site, and during that period, you could tell that a couple things here and there lack polish, but to compensate for that, the creator employs some pretty impressive visual tricks. Chapter 16 in particular was the first time I was genuinely taken aback by the creative decisions and this sequence of panels right here. Not because it's unbelievably original, but because it's weirdly unique for what the manga is. After that, around chapter 20, the title gets officially picked up by Shonen Jump and things start getting more polished. But those moments stay. Sure, they morph and they adapt to what the current arc needs, but they're always there, and now in its last arc, they define it. The creative locations, the detailed and meaningful full pages, the absurd and impossible action sequences are the visual highlight of Kindergarten Wars. Just by looking at the effort put in them, you can tell that Chiba cares about this world and especially about these characters. Even in the more ordinary panels, where there's nothing special happening, the style is able to carry things. It can be the subtle differences in character design or the unfitting fat lines that highlight things in a weird way, or the drastic contrast of the styles that are used. The title is able in a very casual way to stay visually interesting all of the time. Now, it's not like Fortified School, where every other panel deserves to be put up on a wall at your home, but it still manages to keep things fresh. And when you add the highlights from earlier, and a couple full pages that concentrate on a joke, and the manga becomes a pleasure to look at. And now let's actually talk about why you're seeing all this crazy shit in these pages. Everybody kinda has superpowers, but not really. They can reflect bullets, cut anything, punch through walls, just do insane shit, but they're all still regular people who can just kinda lock in really hard. Which is a fine explanation when all that does is produce gags and silly villains, and that is what the majority of the title is. Characters for the most part just engage in banter with each other. Sometimes they're just chilling, other times they're on a mission, but still the meat of the manga is quirky back and forth. Then, of course, some flavor of the week, scary looking hitmen show up to get slaughtered like cattle, so we can return to talking. This is the structure we go by, and it's essentially a breeding ground for simple jokes. And that's not a bad thing. In fact, the manga got a couple real laughs out of me, so For what it is, the comedy works great. It was genuinely enjoyable. Actually, in its execution, it reminded me of another Shonen Jump title, Mashle, which is a combination of One Punch Man and Harry Potter, where everything is being played for a joke. Truly, there isn't a single serious moment in the entire manga, but some of the fights technically have stakes, similarly to how things are in Kindergarten Wars. If Mashle loses a fight, the world will end, and if Rita loses a fight, a bunch of kids will die. Both pretty bad as outcomes, and both are not really taken seriously in their respective series. However, because they are published in Shonen Jump, and to break up the pace, fighting and the vague concept of being powerful has to be included in some fashion. So Mashle, as a title, treats fights semi-seriously, where things start, we crack a couple jokes, then somebody gets seriously hurt, then Mashle saves the day and beats the bad guy in some ridiculous way, and then he has a small sincere moment with the person he saved. That's kind of how every fight plays out. It follows a very linear structure, and something very similar happens in Kindergarten Wars. In any given arc, we find other quirky assassins that fight our main cast. Normally we have some joking around, then we get into it, then everybody is impressed with the absurd fighting style of the new antagonist, and then after some push and pull, the teachers just lock in harder and to win. In both titles, everything connected to the fights is centered around making jokes and surface level tension. Except you already watched the intro, so you know I'm lying to you. Kindergarten Wars diverges from this formula in a couple key ways. First of all, the manga can get pretty gruesome sometimes. The edge of potential gore was treated very carefully in a few panels, and that always surprised me, because the violence is mostly kept in the realm of cartoonish shooting, which for me creates this weird visual conflict where sure the vibes are silly and we're making goofy faces, but also we're setting people on fire and watching them burn alive. The second key difference is backstories and general exposition. All the antagonists we meet have in their fight a flashback to how and why they became hitmen, and every single one of them is meant to be taken seriously and to humanize them as a character. And that inherently cannot work. Not because you can't have genuine plot beats while being a light-hearted comedy, or because you can't have nice vibes that turn dark very quickly. It cannot work because it's not written well into the narrative. All the backstories go over how said character was groomed from a child to kill, or had to fend for themselves from a young age, and the only way to do that was to be an assassin, and how as they grew up they just kept on killing, and that's it. They're all formulated to just tug at your heartstrings, but we don't go into detail about how anything actually happens. The harrowing details of who would hire a child to murder someone, for example, or the first person that this 11-year-old had to kill and how that affected them, all of that is summed up in a single panel, if even that. I understand that this would be a fundamentally different manga and a different experience if it gave more gruesome details, but for me that is the necessary steps that have to be taken for this part of the manga to fit with the rest of the story. Either that or go even more lighthearted and don't even show parts of the sad reality that is murdering for profit. But the way the title is actually written, in this weird limbo where we're supposed to feel for these characters, but only a little bit. Because if you care too much for them, you start analyzing them in the world they exist in, and you will get narrative whiplash, because you realize there's nothing to analyze. This world is simple. It's built for banter and jokes and surface level romance. It simply doesn't hold up under the pressure of the heavy subjects that are tackled in the backstories and general exposition. What makes this feel even worse is that this kind of stepping back from the comedy and the silliness of it all is very well done when it doesn't involve murder. There are these beautiful moments that concentrate on the relationships, romantic or otherwise, of the different characters, the way that the world freezes in all of its detail and lets us absorb the surprisingly complex emotions being portrayed on the page, the amazing build-up to these moments in all their little touches, this right here are the best parts of the manga. This is how you engage with the more realistic side of your story and the people in it. And it's such a shame that all this effort and all the literal pages that are taken up by the backstories are not invested into this part of the manga, because unfortunately these scenes don't come up that often. And even when they do show up, for half of them we take an unnatural break from the narrative to allow them to exist. They're not seamlessly woven into the story, we have to have an excuse for them to even happen, which further illustrates that maybe, just maybe, something had to be tweaked a little more before the manga began publishing. Because right now, Kindergarten Wars is a nice, cozy little house that is built on sand. And that frustrates me, because if only the foundation was a little different, if it didn't take place in modern times, or certain aspects of it were toned down or turned up, it could have been a great little house built on solid ground. This conflict and all the side effects that come from it drag down the experience for me. But at the same time, I also do acknowledge all the strong moments and care that are also a part of this title. So all that just results in all the highs and all the lows kind of leveling out at a mediocre score. And which does not mean that the manga is mediocre, it's just kind of the result of this weird conflict the manga embodies. It's a light 6. But I will continue reading the last arc as it comes out, because I am hooked. The next review on the channel will be on Ichi the Witch. The art goes crazy, and this character you've seen on Twitter is from here. So if you want to check out the manga before the review comes out, you can do that, and we can talk about it on our Discord. Every review on here also exists as a newsletter, which is always written from scratch and is different from its video version, and also it exists in the vertical slope variety. Hey man, I appreciate everybody that watched the entire video. Yes, I did get a cool ass aquarium for my setup, thank you for noticing. And I'll see you in the next review, man. I'm out.